everyone, my name's Ellie and I'm Stitchinbeeee here on flosstube and also over on Instagram. Welcome to my spin-off series of Stitchinbeee's Create With Me. Today we have the final instalment of my Easter egg series, which I hope you've enjoyed watching. And in today's video I'm going to show you the final result of how to finish my cross-stitch Easter egg. So just to recap, if you haven't seen before, this is the lovely pattern from Caterpillar Cross Stitch. This is called Easter Extravaganza, and I am stitching the middle egg here, and my plan is to finish it onto this lovely wooden egg from Hobbycraft. So I'm going to show you step by step how I actually go about doing that. So basically all I've done so far is wash the piece. So I just got a little basin of lukewarm water and some fairy liquid, just a tiny bit, and rinsed it in that for a little time, and then rinsed it and then ironed it, and that is where we are at the moment. So mine is stitched on a 28 count pale pink even weave with DMC threads, and I'll just zoom in to show you a bit more of the stitching. So if you haven't seen my first two videos, the first one I show you how I pick my fabric and how I organise my DMC threads. And in my second video I show you how I start my piece with the loop start and finish with the pin stitch. So there we have it, that's my finished cross stitch piece. So next we're going to interface the piece. And you can buy interfacing from a number of different places. The one I'm going to use is actually from Home Bargains, although I don't think they sell it anymore, unfortunately. But any kind of craft shop, you should just be able to pick up regular iron-on interfacing. Right, so now we're going to interface our cross-stitch piece. So here is my very scrappy interfacing that has been used for many, many different projects. But it doesn't matter because we're only going to use a little piece of it and it doesn't have to be neat or anything. So basically what I'm going to do to start with is just loosely lay that over the front of the piece, just to have a rough idea of what size of piece I need. And then I'll just get my scissors and just roughly cut how much I think I need. Absolutely nothing precise about this step at all. It's going to go on the back and it is just purely there to structure the piece. So I'll just probably trim it a little bit. Don't want to have too much excess. Just move those out of the way and just see how it fits. Can probably take a little bit more off this side. Okay, that looks about right. So the important thing to remember is this is going on the back of the piece. I only used it at the front just to get a rough idea of the size, but this goes on the back, just to make that very clear. And if you look at your interfacing, you basically have a smooth side and a bumpy side. So this is the side with the glue that will adhere to the fabric. So we want the bumpy side to go face down. Just to reiterate again that the interfacing definitely goes on the back of the piece, not the front. Okay, let's go and do that. And to iron this, all we're going to do is put a hot iron, medium temperature, directly on top of this and just kind of press it round. We're not going to smooth it like that, like you would normally iron something. It's just going to be a press, press, press until it adheres properly to the fabric. So I'm back, I have interfaced the piece, as you can see, just a very thin border around the edge, just enough that it covers all the stitches nicely, and it just gives a little bit more strength to the finished piece. So next we're going to make a template for our egg shape, which we can then transfer onto our mount board to then be able to lace our piece. So what I'm going to do is just get some normal plain paper and place this over the top of the egg. I'm going to go and stand by a window and trace the design and I'll come right back. So now I have traced my egg shape here. So what I'm going to do is cut this, make a little square. I'm going to do is fold the paper in half, just along the midpoint of where the egg shape is. Trying to get it as equal as possible. Okay, and then I'm just going to cut around one side. So with this, now we've unfolded it, we can just lay that on the piece and we can see that this is exactly the size that we would need to cover all of the stitching. However, we want a little bit more of a border around it to actually be able to lace our piece onto. So we've got to be mindful of that when we're cutting, that we'll cut a little bit further away from that edge just to give us a little bit more room. So now what I'm going to do is bring in, put these to one side, I'm going to bring in my template and I'm going to pop it onto my mount board. And I'll link the place that I got the mount board from in the description box below. I'm going to draw around, oops, easier said than done when it's on paper. I'm going to draw around the template. Not the nicest thing in the world, but that's okay. There we go. So we're going to cut this out. And we can't really use the paper technique in the same way because the mount board is quite thick. So we're just going to have to cut it out each side by each side. But because of the template, it should be symmetrical, or as symmetrical as it can be. So I'm just roughly cutting this out just so I can get rid of all the excess mount board. Makes it a little bit easier. And then basically all I'm going to do is leave an additional border around this line. So as I say, we've got a little bit more space. So I'll try and keep it as even as possible. You could measure it, I guess, if you really wanted it to be absolutely perfect. I'm just trying to do it roughly by eye. Okay. So that will be our template. I'll just take the edge in just a little bit here. Just to make that a little bit smoother. Again, just smoothing out the edges where I can if I feel there's a bit of a bump. Trying to make it as neat as I can. Okay. Okay, so there is our egg template. You see it there. So again, if we push, then if we turn our fabric over and pop it there, we can see it covers the stitching nicely and we probably have a little bit of excess. I still see a little bump here, so I'm just going to smooth that out again. That's a bit better. Definitely smoother on this side than we are the other, so you can spend a bit of time just perfecting it, getting it just the way you want. If you really want to make sure it's definitely symmetrical, you could even draw around this mount board piece again, just onto your plain paper. And then you could do the same again with making a little square and then folding it in half, and then just checking that your piece is symmetrical. Find the midpoint again. About there. You fold that out and you've got your perfect egg shape. And then we could just compare. So you could always use this template again because this is going to be the larger egg. So I'm just going to draw around this again and cut it out. Okay. Over, so we've got a nice border around the edge. A lovely egg-shaped piece. So now what we're going to do is turn our piece over. We're going to pop our mount board on the back there. And what we're going to do is take the corners off the fabric. So I'm going to get my fabric scissors out for that. So using my lovely Guggenheim fabric scissors, I'm going to remove the card for the moment. I can see where the interfacing is, so I don't need to get too close. But first of all, I'm just going to cut off the corners of the fabric. Just discard them because we don't need them. Then I'll do the same on every other corner. Be quite tentative at first if you wish. Obviously when you cut it off you can't put it back on. But really we're just trying to minimise the bulk. So when we actually lace the piece, we don't have all this extra fabric. So now what I'm going to do is do the sides. Take a little bit off them and just try and round it a little. Doing the same all the way around. Doesn't have to be perfect by any means, but just gradually taking away the fabric. Okay, that should be fine. So before we actually properly mount our piece onto the mount board, we're just going to add an additional layer, which is just some wadding, which just adds a little bit more depth again to the piece. So all I'm going to do is basically put some glue on this and then stick it on to the piece here, cut round it, and then we'll be ready to lace. So to glue this I'm going to use Aleene's tacky glue, which I've ordered from 123 Stitch, and I absolutely love it. So strong and sturdy. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue, doesn't have to be a huge amount, onto the piece there. And you can just use a paintbrush, just smooth it over with my finger. Just make sure all the areas are covered. You only need a nice thin layer. And just stick that down into my batting. I still don't really know what the technical word for this is. I don't know if it's just wadding or batting or if that's the same thing. But yeah. I'm going to wash my hands and let this dry for a wee minute. Now we're going to cut out our piece, and all you're going to do is follow the line exactly. Sometimes the wadding can get a little bit crinkled, so I did actually iron this prior to gluing the mount board onto it. It just makes the whole piece look a little bit smoother to one side. So now we've got our piece, just tidy up that a little bit there, and now we've got some wadding on it, so it again just gives a little bit more strength. So I've also got the interfacing on the back of this one, a bit of wadding on the mount board, and that just makes the piece a little bit stronger. So now we're going to secure it in place, and again it just takes a minute to ensure that you're covering all the areas, making sure there's an equal gap between both sides, trying to make it look as symmetrical as possible. Just use these cauting clips to ensure that it's in the right place. So now what we're going to do is turn it round, and we're basically going to divide the piece into three. So I do this with all my circular finishing. If I was doing a square piece, I would just go from corner to corner, side to side, and do a zigzag form. But with this oval shaped piece and also anything circular, I just like to split this piece into 3 and work from there. So my first point is always the top and the middle. So I'm just going to draw a line there. And then you could work it out by working out the diameter. This is more the case if it was a circular piece, but I just like to divide it into 3, roughly where I think is right. Doesn't have to be perfect by any means, but these are going to be my 3 points, so you could label them 1, 2 and 3. You're obviously not going to see this back part, so you can write on what you want. I'm going to use my lacing thread, which is a DMC B5200. So I found this in the garden centre on offer just for £1. So this is more of a kind of crochet cotton, I believe. So I have bought some more of it since, of a different brand that is also called crochet cotton. So that's quite a good thing to look out for if you can't find this exact one. I'd never heard of it before, I just happened to find it. I thought, oh, it's quite a good thickness for lacing. See, it's not divisible or anything, if you can see it there. So it's nice and sturdy and strong, so it's just what we want. And you basically just want to create a length, probably, I know, 1.5 arms length. The longer the thread, the more chance there is of it knotting, but I'm not so keen on stopping and starting the thread once I start lacing, so I prefer a longer amount of thread, but you could always shorten it if you feel it's getting too knotted. And I don't normally with cross stitching or anything, but with this I just make a simple knot. It's kind of not focusing now. This normal knot around my finger, and I do this 2 or 3 times just to make sure it's nice and sturdy. Okay, and then needle wise I'm just going to use these crewel needles which my mum gave me. Basically anything that has an eye big enough to allow you to put that thread through it. So then all you're going to do is thread your needle as normal. Just like that. Pull it a bit through. And then all you're going to do is start from number 1. So I'm just going to start where number 1 is, so where my number 1 line is. And I'm just going to pop my needle through there. Again, not too tight because I don't want it to show through, but just under the fabric and then out through the top. And you just pull it through. Sometimes you will get knots along the way, but often you can easily untangle them. Yes, you could use some wax or something just to smooth the thread a little. That would make it easier for you. Okay, so that's our first thread secure. So now we're going to go to point number 2. Just going to put my needle under the fabric, pop it through there and pull through. Good arm workout this. Ooh, caught my flowers there. Okay, just make sure it's not wrapped around your quarters clip. And then you guessed it, we then go to number 3. Sometimes you can get a little bit of resistance if you manage to get some hold of the interfacing at all. That's okay, you can just move it down a little bit. Okay, so now we've done our first 3 stitches. So then what we're going to do is just go back to number 1 again, but we're going to move to the right of number 1 and just go a couple of stitches over. Again, doesn't have to be an exact measurement or anything, but you don't want the stitches too close together because otherwise it will just take too long and you'll end up using loads of thread. But you also don't want them too far apart, otherwise you won't get the shape of the egg and it might look a little bit loosey-goosey. So Yeah, and you can see as we tighten it, it draws the fabric in. So we've done that. Now we move back to number 2 and we just go to the right again. And you basically just repeat this process all the way around. And you'll always know where you are because you're always going to the right of the next stitch basically. And so it'll look a mess when you first start because you've got all this thread hanging around, but you soon use it up. Okay, and you just want to make sure it doesn't go to the front, otherwise you'll end up having it on show. Okay, so we've done number 2, and then you guessed it, we go to the right of the stitch of number 3. Okay, you just want to make sure it's nice and taut. Not too tight, but taut enough that you haven't got any loose threads or anything. And once you've done a few more stitches, you can check front and just see how it's looking. Let's probably go around again. Again to the right of the stitch at number 1. So now I have finished lacing the back of the piece, as you can see there. Just repeated the process again and again and again. And I've got my little tail left here, so I'll just show you how I finish that off. So I'm just going to thread my needle again. And then to finish, all I'm going to do is go under some of the fabric. And then ideally you would have left a slightly longer tail, but you're basically going to make a little knot. So if I just pull that through a little bit more, I'll pull it through once, but then I'm going to go back through the hole and just pull, and then I'm going to repeat that again. Doesn't matter where in the fabric you go. It's just a case of securing it. I didn't quite reach that bit there. But if you haven't got too much left, even just going under some of the fabric again. That's all you need to do to finish it off. Okay, so that's nice and secure now. It's not going anywhere, so we can just cut that. So just cut the end off. And here we have our finished laced piece.